This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. Negotiations continue on the Senate over the Democrats' Build Back Better plan, negotiations that at this point appear to be just among the Democrats themselves. Here for a perspective from the other side of the aisle is Senator Bill Haggerty of Tennessee. So, Senator, thank you so much for being with us. Give us your perspective on this. First of all, are you as Republicans having any role at all in negotiating, talking about this Build Back Better, or is it all on the Democrat side?
David, it's entirely on the Democrat side. They're engaging Republicans at no level in this conversation. This is really a battle amongst themselves, and they're having a very difficult time with it. The size of this monstrosity has actually been sort of reduced and reduced and reduced through a series of budgetary gimmicks. But on Friday, the CBO released what it would actually look like in reality if it were scored over a normal 10-year period. What the Democrats did was they left 10 years worth of revenue in, but they cut back the expenditures to just 1 year, knowing that the programs are never going to be turned off. As Milton Friedman said, there's nothing more permanent than a temporary federal program. So when you score this over 10 years, you get close to $5 trillion more that they're talking about introducing into the economy at a time when inflation is hitting record numbers. I mean, we've had the highest levels of inflation since 1982. That's when Diet Coke was introduced. The American public is feeling this. It's hitting them hard. And I think this is making their path toward getting this thing passed very, very difficult.
And inflation, of course, is very much a topic of the day as the Federal Reserve, about an hour and 45 minutes from now, will tell us about their latest decision. A lot of pressure on them to try to do something with inflation. But connect the dots, if they can be connected, between Build Back Better on the one hand and inflation on the other, because as you know, some Democrats are saying this is not inflationary. If anything, it might reduce prices.
I've heard this, and it's the most ludicrous argument I can imagine. What they're talking about is another $5 trillion that are going to crowd out private investment. It's going to be more cash flowing into the economy like fuel onto a fire. And what happens as well is there's a psychological element of this, David, meaning that if a person thinks that something is going to be more expensive tomorrow than it is today, it's going to accelerate their tendency to buy. Think about it. If you know that gas prices are going up tomorrow, you're probably going to fill your tank up tonight. It's that sort of mentality that's taking place, is taking hold, because what they can see at a headline level is the Democrats promise to spend more and more and more of their hard-earned money to flush that into the economy and create more inflation. I mean, it's just been incredible what's happened so far this year.
So let me push you and ask you, what are the odds that, in fact, Build Back Better makes it through the Senate before the new year?
I think it's very low. I think the odds are very low that this gets done before the new year. They're having a massive debate amongst themselves. Many elements of this are essentially centralized government. They're socialism. There's a war on the fossil fuel industry embedded in this bill. They're talking about raising taxes and killing job creation in America at a time when we need to be getting our economy back, when we need to be more competitive. They're talking about policies that will push jobs offshore. There are more giveaways for big business, and certainly the richest of their donors are getting big giveaways in this plan. And I think that's a very tough argument to make to middle America, who's feeling the broad-based tax increase, if you will, of inflation that's running rampant.
Okay, I want to come back to your home state of Tennessee, because it was hit hard by these tornadoes. We hear a lot about Kentucky, but it wasn't just Kentucky. Tennessee was hit as well. Give us a sense of how bad it is in Tennessee and what it needs from the federal government.
David, it's very bad in Tennessee. The tornadoes hit West Tennessee all the way through Middle Tennessee. Electricity was out from Memphis all the way through Nashville. Thousands of people were without electricity. We've had 4 lives lost already. There's another person still missing. 10 people are hurt. Millions, if not billions of dollars worth of property damage has occurred. On Monday morning, Governor Lee of our state reached out to the White House. Senator Blackburn and I came right in with him to urge the White House to step up and make this declare this an emergency area. The federal government has stepped up and agreed. FEMA's resources are coming to us right now. So we're doing everything that we can to make certain that Tennessee is taken care of. Our hearts go out to our neighbors in Missouri, Arkansas, who were hit, and certainly in Kentucky, they got hit very hard.
We have President Biden visiting Kentucky, neighboring state of Kentucky, today. In general, during times of emergency like this, there has been true bipartisan cooperation. Is that going on now? Are you satisfied with what the administration is doing?
Yes, you're going to see that sort of bipartisan cooperation here. I fully expect it, and everybody is stepping up as they should.
Let me turn to another subject. As I mentioned, the Federal Reserve is meeting and is going to announce its decision in a short time from right now. There are some openings on the Federal Reserve. We hear from one of your colleagues, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio today, that they expect by the end of the week maybe to have some nominations for the key positions, including for many people on Wall Street, the key position of supervising the banks. What do you expect to happen?
You know, it's something that's unfolding as we speak. You saw the hearing with the comptroller of the currency candidate that went very, very poorly. I need to see a much more responsible set of nominees moving forward from the Biden administration. We can't have nominees of that caliber moving forward at a time that's so critical. We've got, again, inflation running rampant. We've got grave concerns about our economy. We need to make America the most competitive economy in the world, and we need the right sort of leadership to do that. So I'm going to be looking at the nominees very carefully, but I think that the Biden administration should hearken and learn from what happened with their most recent nominee for the comptroller of the currency.
Which, of course, has been withdrawn, as you say. At the same time, there was that exchange we saw between one of, again, your colleagues, Senator Elizabeth Warren, and Janet Yellen about exactly what needs to be done with respect to the supervisor position. Also asking Powell, Chair Powell, will you defer to this person? How badly do we need somebody who will be tougher on regulation?
You know, I think at a time that we are suffering as an economy, more regulation isn't the answer. Getting the government out of the way tends to be the answer. Responsible regulation is what we need to be looking for, not just more and more volume. The Democrats' answer always seems to be, you know, let's pile more and more regulations onto a system, make it more and more burdensome. Well, that's great for lawyers and for compliance people, but I'd like to see our economy grow. So I'd much prefer smart, reliable regulation that actually provides for growth rather than constraint.
And finally, Senator, we started this interview by saying how much Congress really had gotten accomplished over the fall. I mean, we've reauthorized the government. We've gotten an infrastructure bill passed. Talk to us about the Defense Authorization Act that I believe you just voted on.
I did. I just cast a vote on the National Defense Authorization Bill. It's going to increase our defense budget by 5% over the prior year. That's absolutely necessary, given the fact that we are facing more crises around the world than we have in recent times, many of that due to the misadventures of this current administration. We've given a pay raise to the men and women in the military. It's close to 3%. Given the inflation of 7%, it's still not a real increase, but certainly moving in the right direction. And it's also made a significant impact on my home state because we're stepping up investment in our nuclear capabilities, and Oak Ridge is a great beneficiary of that.
Take us forward into the new year, if you would, Senator, because there's going to be an election. It's an off-year election, midterm so-called. What do you expect to be the position of the Republican Party going into those midterm elections?
Well, I think the disastrous ratings of the Democrats right now tell you a lot. The Republicans are well positioned to take control of both the House and the Senate. We intend to do everything that we can to take control because we've got to stop these massive spending programs, these efforts to bring more government control into our lives, whether it be mandates, whether it be more regulation, and also the amount of spending that's going into the economy is actually putting a crippling debt burden on the shoulders of our children and grandchildren. I think the American public sees that the Republican Party is the party that can push back on this, bring this to a stop, and turn our economy back in the right direction again.
So, Senator, help me, because you're an elected official, so you know how the voters really react to this. I've seen polls that suggest people are not against spending, they're against being taxed on the spending. They're happy to spend money for their own benefit. Does the debt limit really affect voters back in Tennessee? Do they vote on things like how much debt is being accumulated?
Well, it certainly should. For those of us that have children and grandchildren, it's our obligation to be thinking about their future. Right now, we've pushed the debt limit, we've pushed the national debt up close to $30 trillion. And if you look at this new Build Back Better scheme that the Biden administration is proposing, if you look at the amount of incremental debt that the CBO just scored on Friday that would be dropped on the backs of our children and grandchildren, another $3 trillion. This is a massive amount of money. It's a massive tax, if you will, that's being placed on our future. It's something that we've got to push back on. It's something we've got to curb now as responsible leaders.
But, Senator, as a practical matter, isn't the only way to really push back on it, not through the debt ceiling, but by not spending the money or even by cutting some of the expenses? And I'm not sure I've heard many Republicans or Democrats come up with real plans to cut government spending.
Well, there's two aspects of it. One, just as you mentioned, cutting government spending. There's so much waste, fraud, and abuse. There's a real opportunity there. The other is to grow our economy, to increase revenues over time. Those are business-friendly policies like we saw in the previous administration. You remember, our GDP growth rate took off over twice that of any other major economy once we got the 2017 Tax Law Act passed, once we went through a major deregulatory process. That's the way to get our economy going. That would, in the long term, grow our economy, grow our tax revenues, and if we can come back and cut federal spending at the same time, that's how we bring this under control.
Senator, it's always great to have you with us. Thank you for your time. That's Senator Bill Haggerty. He's a Republican of Tennessee. Coming